My name is Travis Stillson, and I build custom show chaps and custom headstalls. I've been doing it for a little over 20 years now. What I use for all my chaps is a top grain leather. It's rough on one side, smooth on the other. I don't use any split leather. Split leather is too soft. It's just not a very good quality. And then after we decided what color and so on, then I take the person's measurements. Each one is individual. It's personalized for that person, and then I go and make a paper pattern off of those measurements, and from that paper pattern then I cut out the bodies, make the bodies from that, and put the cuff on, and cut the fringe all by hand. And depending on what they want to do for the tops, if it's tooled, then we'll tool it and it's all tooled by hand. If it's an exotic, then we just put whatever exotic that they want on it, and that's how we do that. When I cut the bodies out, I don't cut it exact. I have my leather laying out, my side of leather, kind of like this, and then I'll lay my pattern on it, and that's not a full side, so it doesn't give you the full picture, but then I just kind of cut it out big to leave myself some room, and that way then I'll mark off where it should go, put my zippers in, and I've got extra in case I need to fudge it a little bit. I'll give myself some room. Then I cut my fringe in, and then I come back at each of these these marks here, these lines here, and at this point it's 7 inches. Here it's 7.5. So I cut my fringe in, then come back, mark the length, and trim that off. So nothing's cut exact. Everything's blocked out, and then we put things where they need to go, and then trim it to where it needs to be in the end. When I cut my bodies out, when I just block it out, is just I use a rotary cutter. For this leather I do, and that's the same thing that I cut my fringe with. I also just use a straight edge and this rotary cutter for the fringe. And then when it comes to cutting this out, then I'll just use kind of a utility knife, and just as you can see, it's not cut, it's marked off to the exact the lines are exact here, but it's not cut exactly, because this stuff will, when you're tooling it, it'll kind of stretch, but then ultimately when it dries back, it'll shrink a little bit. So I always leave myself extra room there too to resize everything and get it just right in the end. So I draw all the patterns first. I make my yoke, the overall yoke pattern. Then I draw all my tooling patterns in. So this is just one of my tools. It's a beveler, and that's what I use on these lines, these long lines here. I mean, when I first started out, it wasn't like, oh, this is just no problem, you know. You just got to keep doing it. It's like anything else. You just got to keep going and get more steady and a little smoother with your lines, and using all the tools, you know. You got to fade those lines out really nice, and each step, you know, builds on the one before it. So the overall detail that I put in my stuff, and I'm not knocking anybody else. I don't want to put, but it's just kind of is what it is. But I just like details, so I put a lot more detail in all of my stuff. You know, every little stitch needs to be right, and so there's a lot of time and a lot of detail. That's kind of what separates what I do from your average, you know, maker.